As I'm preparing to install the swing arm back into the Yamaha YL1, one of the parts I've been struggling with is this little rubber guard. And this goes around the swing arm pivot and acts as a guard to prevent the chain, as it rotates, from scraping against the swing arm. It's a piece of formed rubber, as you can see here, and this one obviously is damaged. Yamaha calls this a seal guard, and I've been looking for a new one, NOS, or at least a good used one, for months and haven't been able to find one. And there's a little confusion with this part. There's several different part numbers that are used. They superseded the part numbers, and I've tried to wade through all of that, and I think I have the right part numbers, but nonetheless, I have not been able to find one. So what I think I'm going to do, or have to do, is resurrect this one to make it work. Now, there's one fundamental issue with this, and that's obviously it's torn. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to repair that so that I can put it back on the bike. The other issue, though it's not as critical, is the fact that it's got a deformation or it's deformed here. So I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to heat this section gently with a hot air gun and see if I can straighten this piece out, because I'm sure that's supposed to be straight, not have that curve in it. And see if I can get that realigned. If I can, then I'm going to move on to re-gluing this. If this gives me a little bit of trouble and fights me, I'm probably going to leave this alone, because that actually is underneath the swing arm, I think, like that. And then I'll just go ahead and repair this tear. And there's also a little bit of a break developing right there as well that I'll repair at the same time. Here's the parts diagram from the Yamaha parts website. And the item I'm talking about here is number 2. Down here in blue, it's called the seal guard, not available. I don't think that part number is correct. When I found that part number, which I have found several times, it doesn't look anything like this part. So I think there's an error in this diagram. I think I did find the right part number eventually, but I haven't been able to locate one either used or NOS on eBay or anywhere else for that matter. So that's going to force me to go ahead, I think, and repair the one I have and put it back into service. Not in ideal condition, but really don't have any choice. So my intent here is to soften this deformed section right here with a hot air gun and see if I can gently work it back into shape. The key here, or the trick, is heating it enough so I can reshape it, but not so much that I burn it or deform it. So let's give this a go. Well, it's been about 15 or 20 minutes, and this is I've allowed this to cool down. And I don't think I'm going to get it any better than what you see here. It just was deformed for too long. I'm afraid if I get it too hot, I'm going to deteriorate this old rubber material. It's already a little bit compromised, of course, so I think that's about as good as I'm going to get it. There might be a little marginal improvement, but really not much. And I didn't hold out great hopes that is going to straighten out. The only other thing I could possibly do is find a piece of black stiff plastic, cut it out to this shape, and glue it in here to try to straighten this out. But I don't think I'm going to do that. I think it might end up damaging this. So I'm going to move on to repairing this rip. I think what I'm going to do is get a piece of inner tube. I've got a lot of old inner tubes. This will have to be cleaned really well. Cut a piece of inner tube that will act as almost like a Band-Aid, and run it on the inside here, and using contact cement, glue using the adhesive, the inner tube to the inside here to hold this together. There's no way that attempting to glue these ends is going to hold. There's just not enough surface area there. So I think I can do it and make it look pretty good. And I can cover this rip right here, this starting to form, by extending the patch further down. So let me see if what I've got for old inner tubes, and see if I can't get something set up here. So I went and dug this piece of old inner tube. It's a fairly thick inner tube out of my stash, and I don't know if you can see the lines, but I laid out some lines right there, some straight lines. It's about 21 millimeters wide, which is about the width of the band. So I'm just going to take the scissors here and I'm going to cut this piece out. I'm going to clean both sides of this really well as the inside of the item I'm attempting to fix, in preparation for contact adhesive. There's the patch and approximately the location where I'm going to glue it in with contact cement. It's been cleaned. This surface has been cleaned really well, and the inside of the part itself has been cleaned really well with brake cleaner. You can see that I rounded the edges of the patch off, just like you do if you're patching an inner tube on a tire. You should never leave square edges because they're easy to get peeled back. So I just rounded them with the scissors. And now I'll go ahead and apply contact cement to both surfaces. I think what I'm going to do is do it in two phases. That is, the first phase, I'm going to glue the patch starting in here like that and get it in position with adhesive, and then I'm going to work my way around to the curve, which is actually a little bit more complex. I think that's what I'm going to do. I don't know if you can hear the weather outside, but it's storming, raining and blowing a little bit, and they're talking about severe weather later this afternoon. Anyway, what I ended up doing, you can see here in the shot, that rubber seal guard that I've put back together with contact adhesive and a patch. After looking at it for a few minutes, I determined that I had to reassemble it on the swing arm. Otherwise, I was going to have to stretch it over the end of the swing arm and work it down and around, and there's just, I don't think, enough elasticity left in that part to do that, and I was afraid I was going to break the bond of the patch. So what I did is I glued it up on the swing arm like you see here. So now we're going to go ahead and put this assembly onto the bike. Alright, I got everything positioned. You can see the swing arm is in place. I've got my tools. I'm going to be using old shock absorbers temporarily right now, only because I haven't sorted out long-term what I'm going to use. This is a spare set of the appropriate shocks. These are the shocks that were used on the YL1. But they're just going to be used temporarily to support the swing arm. You can see the swing arm pivot there that I recently cleaned and replated, did a little work on, anti-seize, hardware on both sides. It's a dual setup, obviously, for both sides. So everything's pretty much ready to go. Here at the top, right there on that top mounting bolt, I think you can see, point to it here, right there. I took the paint off and I polished the paint off of that top stud because the clearance for the shocks was so tight that the shocks wouldn't fit unless I took the buildup of paint off. I do have anti-seize on all the fasteners ready to go. It's already pre-done, including that stud that you're looking at on each side. So first thing we're going to do now is start with mounting the shocks. We're going to put them on that top mount or boss so that they're hanging vertical, and then we can go ahead and put the swing arm in place. Again, there's really nothing to this. At the top there are what they call plates. Yamaha calls them plates. I have ordered new versions of these that again are not in yet, still waiting for delivery. They are available. But two of them go on the inside like that, on each side, and then the shock fits over it. This is the original, or one of the original nuts, crown nuts that go on and get. These are not available from Yamaha. These were chromed, I believe, originally. And I have to figure out a plan to replace those as well. But right now I'm just going to use these temporarily so that I can get on with the assembly of the bike. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Two plates. Shock and the crown nut. Finger tight. I'm not going to tighten these up. In case you're wondering, there's plenty of space here between the shock and the fender. Now we're going to go ahead and actually mount the swing arm to the bike. I'm going to put a little bit of grease, just a little bit of a smear on the pivot itself, just to make it a little easier for it to go through this mounting boss right here. Now comes probably the trickiest part, even though it's not complicated. Because of this rubber damper, chain damper seal that Yamaha calls it, I don't want to overstretch that, but what happens is that has to go up over this boss, so it wraps around this inner tube on the shock, or rather on the swing arm, and then wraps around this mounting boss. So I'm going to work this up in such a way I can get that started. And then bring everything in alignment like that. Then I'm going to take the pivot get it started through. You'll notice I have a box back here just to support the back of the swing arm. It's not quite where I want it to be. There we go. We got it now. one note, this pivot will have to come out at a later date because this is used as part of the muffler mount. We're way far away from that, but eventually I will have to pull this bolt out to mount the mufflers another time in another place. I'm just going to go ahead and put the nut on the end of the pivot swing arm pivot, I should say. And now the swing arm is mounted. In terms of the lower shock mounts, I'm going to use just a plastic washer temporarily. Again, this is normally a plate, and I had these plastic washers I bought years ago from Eastwood, and that's going to go between the bolt right here. These are the originals, and they were replated. It does have anti-seize on it. That goes through from the inside out. The plastic washer will go between the washer and the painted portion of the swing arm. So we'll just all you do is rotate this shock up, bring the swing arm up into position. The swing arm is threaded. There's an internal thread in here, so this threads in, and then this washer nut combination goes on the outside to secure it permanently. And the purpose of the washer, the plastic washer, is just to prevent marring the paint. I'm just going to snug this up a little bit. I'm not going to overdo it. So even though the bolt itself isn't going to come out, the nut will come off eventually. So that's just snug. Now we got to do the same thing on this side. Again, anti-seize is already on the bolt. Goes through from the inside like that and threads into the end of the swing arm. Thread that through. That was a little snugger. I'm going to have to use I did chase all these threads also, by the way. You get paint out of the various spots around the bike. The threads were chased. Otherwise you get paint buildup, and it can make it difficult to get things threaded properly. And the nut will be finger tight, the bolt is going to be snug. So the swing arm is now mounted. The pivot is the nut on the other side is only finger tight because that will have to come out later. This rubber, what Yamaha calls a seal or a guard, I think it's called a seal guard actually, is to protect the frame here from the chain as it's wrapping around, going around. If it gets loose, This bike is not going to be ridden in anger, so I put it in only to maintain originality. I hope I don't ever, at this point, actually ever find a new one, to be honest with you, because if I do, I got to take this all apart. If the wheel's on it, I have to take the wheel off to get the new one in here. I'd really rather avoid that at this point, because essentially this won't be seen once everything's buttoned up and put together. But it is in place, and it maintains originality. Next steps then would be to mount the rear wheel, and that will be the subject of the next video. Any questions or comments, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.